Yeah, and it's like, what are you doing to, further the, trajectory of humankind? Like, people's stories these days are important, so it's important to go out there and live life, to have something to say.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a big, I do love technique, and like I mentioned, I love painting.
Such a sucker.
Such a sucker for some good technique.
Such a sucker for I know this guy has done it got this perspective and got this stuff down without a photograph or whatever, straight from his head, because maybe the scene isn't realistic or whatever, but there's technique, and I'm just such a sucker for that.
Absolutely. But I also totally agree with you that the story and that's a lot of weighs quite heavily, and I think for me that's really important, what you bring into it. And
exactly, yeah.
You know what? I love my Gustav Klimt. Let me meet him.
He'd be the guy you have to block on Instagram.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think so too. But how amazing if Gustav Klimt's DMing me.
So how have you found COVID basically? Have you sold more? Have you sold less? Have you been more productive? Has it affected your life in any way? Your artistic life?
The world pandemic definitely had some effects on my life. Believe it or not. No, I'm joking. I have found, yes, I have found it affected my life, surprisingly. The shutdown of the world and the economic system did have an impact. Yeah, my partner and I left Cape Town to go to his family place in Plet. So I left my studio and I kind of made a makeshift studio in Plet, which was super amazing. And I feel really grateful that I had the opportunity to create a space there, because I really do need space to work, and wouldn't have been able to work in my apartment.
Yeah, it's very different for an artist,
Yeah, and something about the toxic fumes and all of that, just, not ideal.
Yeah.
But it also impacted my sense of direction and what I was interested in. And I find that to create art, I really need to be almost slightly obsessed with something.
Yeah.
And I also create when I'm in a good space. And so all the uncertainty and just the confusion related to Corona, I think for at least a while really made me feel not super creative, and I just spent a lot more time researching and recouping and
watching the
consuming.
Chart of I spent a lot of time watching the world chart of infections or whatever,
Spent an enormous amount of time on Worldometer.
It's funny, yeah.
But it was kind of nice, because I'd gone from studying to doing a straightish solo show, and a lot of side projects. It was a little bit of a forced downtime, and a forced time to reflect and look at where my work has gone and where I'm at, and kind of reconcile that. So that was quite interesting.
For a lot of people, it was like that.
Yeah.
For me, I decided to do first year computer science just because everything was remote.
Yeah, it's completely.
ECT was remote, and I didn't have to, go and be in class with 19-year-olds and have to deal with the social stigma of that,
The social stigma.
Who's this old dude, But it's something I always regretted, and a lot of people, COVID sort of shook up their lives a bit, sort of pulled them onto the path, or gave them a new path, or
Absolutely. I feel that too.
But obviously, people are selling online much more now, which is kind of cool.
I mean, in terms of that, that was incredible. I thought that I presumed people weren't going to buy art during this time because it was so much uncertainty, but I did feel that people were really supportive and actually buying a lot of art, and there was a lot of interest. I didn't feel like I necessarily sold this, but in the sense that Cape Town Art Fair was cancelled, that had a massive impact on my opportunities to sell. And then also in terms of I usually do a lot of commissions. I feel like my work is kind of has two sides, and the one is doing my personal work, which often goes in the gallery, and my paintings, and the other side is working with restaurants or designers for homes, and kind of doing murals and larger scales, and all of that obviously went down the window. So
because everyone sort of tightened up.
Yes, and restaurants get cancelled, and it was harder to collaborate, and so it was definitely a shift for me.
But now people are sort of spending more money on their gardens, spending more money on decorating their house because they're there all the time now,
I know. So now it's kind of blossoming a bit again.
So it's even better, yeah.
I think it's going to be a very interesting time going forward.
Zoom meetings and things, it's the norm now, It's completely normal. So buying art online is more normal. So okay, so you're not South African, born and bred. You what Afrikaners would call like a soti, but you're not British.
What did you say?
A soti.
I've never
A
heard
soti
that.
has one leg in London or in England and one leg in South Africa.
No way.
Yeah.
I've lived there for almost 10 years and I've never heard that expression before.
Okay. It's a little bit cruder than that, but people can fill in the blanks. I'll tell you later.
Oh, okay. No, actually I'm from Norway and I grew up in Norway mostly and traveled to South Africa when I was 19. I was meant to come for like 3 months and 3 months turned into a couple of years and then a couple more, and you know how it goes.
Yeah.
So
It's under the skin.
yeah, just slowly. And I think, I don't know, something about the sun and the beach and the good life was just very appealing.
And, and Cape Town has, well, South Africa in general, well, Joburg and Cape Town have all the sort of, it's like Sydney, it's like a small Sydney, that we have all the, like the internet and all the infrastructure, like works perfectly.
I mean, you do have the internet. It's absolutely amazing. You're right.
No, but I mean like good internet, like, because going to, like, I've just been back from Zanzibar and it's like, oh my gosh, like, you never know, like.
No, you're right. It definitely has a lot of like infrastructure and opportunities happening, like just in terms of studying. Michaelis is located in Cape Town, which is a super cool art school. So yeah.
So what would you say your early influences are?
How early are we going?
Depends.
Ooh.
How long do you have?
All day. I have no plans. It's Corona.
Level 4?
Level 4, exactly. Got a lot of time. I think I've always loved drawing and painting, like since I was a child. My parents said that they bought me this like roll of paper and I used to come home and like obsessively draw on it after school every day, just for hours. Girls in lines with squares and each girl in one square, which in retrospect looks very, I don't know, very obsessive. But that was like from my early childhood and I just continued loving it. But I would say the first time I really kind of spent a lot of time working with art in a more professional way was when I got to South Africa. I think my early inspirations was always just painting. I've always loved paintings. I love colors. I loved like all the classics, Gustav Klimt and Edgar Degas or Toulouse-Lautrec. I'm probably butchering them all because I just spoke to them in my own language. I didn't really have to pronounce the names loudly.
That's pretty good. It's better than the South African would do.
Okay, good.
Toulouse-Lautrec, yeah.
But so like a lot of the Impressionists and a lot of kind of the classics were definitely early inspirations for me before I went to art school and before I really maybe became acquainted with the contemporary art world.
Yeah. And was there a person that sort of pushed you in that direction or cultivated you, or would you just say that you, like your parents or your aunt or something like that?
Well, my mom is an interior designer, so she works a lot with colors and has that interest.
It's in the blood, yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I think my dad's an economist, but he does like to think of himself as an artist as well. So definitely wouldn't degrade his input.
Like not creative accounting, but creative economics.
Creative economics.
He probably listened to this.
He will probably listen to this. Dad, you've been very inspiring. No, I think both my parents have been incredibly supportive, and people have really been facilitating. And like when I was really quite young, I used to make like pop-up shows in the home and stuff, and they were always like really supporting it and the value of creative endeavors. And so
totally,
yeah, I've always felt like it was a valid thing to do.
Definitely. But I think that kids that want to go into visual things, like if they're sort of grown, if they're like, you can't sort of discount the importance of like growing up around art and around interior design and things like that. Like it all sort of gets into your bloodstream,
Oh, completely. Like I really believe we're so shaped and formed by art.
Yeah, like you can just see when something's right or wrong, kind of. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah, and I think it just seeps into you. From early childhood, different influences.
So where can people go for like a full bio of you, like websites or gallery websites or your website?
I'm represented by 99 Love Gallery, so they have quite a bit of my work and a little bit about me, but I also do have my own website, and I'm quite active on Instagram. I think it's such a cool platform to really like engage with with other artists and with collectors and friends, and kind of share a little bit more about the process and what's behind than just the finished works.
And Instagram is like super fast, like from a tech like perspective. Like, I can just tell you that app is just like, it's not even an app. It's like a force of nature. It's just like it's like you touch this table and it feels like a table. Like Instagram, it's just like, you know, obviously it's like one of the biggest apps in the world, but it's so responsive and just amazing. And
it's incredible. I mean, I know that there's a lot to be said about like social media and has a lot of negative side effects, but like as an artist and predominantly using it to be inspired and to engage, it's so cool.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like, I can imagine that if I was 15 and I was using it in a different way, maybe like it could boost insecurities and all of that stuff. But like in terms of, it also has this amazing potential.
Definitely.
Like you connect to people from all across the world. Like I've got favorite artists, American artists that are far further in their career than me that have like responded to things and engaged with me.
Exactly, yeah.
And it just feels quite insane to get to do that.
But also the like the search capability, like the discovery is what they call it. Like you're discovering new people all the time, and it's just, it feels like impersonal and stuff. But like for instance, Spotify, you know, if you make a playlist, then it's going to continue that playlist for you automatically, and you just click refresh, and it gives you like a whole bunch of new songs that are similar to that to the songs in your playlist. And that feels like, yeah, in the old days, like I remember growing up, people telling you, oh, listen to this band, oh, listen to that band, this is a cool band and stuff.
Yeah.
And like someone knowing all these different bands was like a major a major asset. It was like a,
yeah, it was like a proper asset.
like you thought, wow, like that person has really put in the time, they know so much. Whereas these days, like you don't have to know so much to get to discover all like a multitude of different bands or different things. It's the same with artists, you know.
Absolutely. Which can also be really like unnerving, and you can feel like it's impossible to do something fresh or different, or you're always,
and you're being fed things from the algorithm. But yeah, I guess it's so much richer. Like it is. Yeah, I mean, like for instance, like Paul Wellington. Like what I was looking through, you know, just what was it? Stories or something, you know, that just pop up, and one of his things just popped up, and I was like, whoa, okay, that's different. That's like, okay. And then I was like, cool, I want to interview that guy, you know?
Yeah.
Because before it might have taken me longer to find that person, you know?
Yeah, completely. Like just the fact that you can connect with so many different, and people that like are totally not in your sphere, or yeah, it just allows for this slightly more personal way to like than an email. It feels like, you know, you can kind of comment or like slide in the DMs a little bit easier. I don't know. A lower threshold.
Slide into the DMs sounds like so bad.
So dodgy.
Like,
I know.
So but you can on Instagram, like you just, if you don't really want to listen to people, like you only like, you can accept the messages from any certain people, you know?
Absolutely.
Like the people who send me messages all the time, like, you know, I'm a struggling artist, blah, 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 like, you know?
Do you turn down a lot of them?
I don't read most of them.
Oh, really?
But there's one dude who sent me, or more than one, but one dude that I might interview because he DM'd me, you know?
Oh.
It's pretty cool.
I try to respond to my DM. I do take time, I must admit. And I obviously don't like, and there's like a few spams and stuff, but generally people comment like
exactly, yeah,
nice things.
They're your fans, you know?
There's the occasional guy who's just like,
oh yeah,
and you're like, oh,
yeah.
they don't really know this conversation.
Yeah, hectic. But for me, it's like people asking, you know, to invest into their like artworks, or like, you know.
Yeah.
But
so people approach you to actually invest in their artwork.
The art investor, you know what I mean? So people often like,
yeah, you should have thought about that.
Give me money for, you know.
I'm gonna slide in afterwards. Give me some money.
But yeah, could you take us through your artistic process, your process for creating art?
Sorry, that would be my dog. He is surprisingly awake.
He's he's not sleeping now. He's like, wow, a podcast is happening. Let's play.
I feel like my process of creating artworks is still something I'm trying to fully understand myself in a way, I think.
Oh, it'll always be like that, apparently.
Okay, I'm very happy to hear that. Yeah, it's molding and changing with me, but I'm coming to grips with with a few things about my own art process that I think I've found quite difficult to embrace. And one is like I'm a really I have to be emotionally invested and like have this like little fire about something or obsession to create artworks about something. And if I don't have it, it really just feels very pointless.
So do you go through dry patches?
Yes. And it also changes focus. It changes what it is. So I'll go through a phase where I'm extremely interested in something, and then it's something else. And it kind of, and for a long time, and particularly perhaps in relation to studying, there was the process that was required at university was maybe slightly different. And I think I found it quite hard because often they wanted us to come up with concepts and ideas and then execute them. And I mean, it also taught me a lot, and it has broadened my way of working. But I've definitely come to realize that I'm quite like, I like the practical engagement of art. So I think a lot of the thinking and making must happen. An important part of my process is the creation, obviously, I suppose. But that happens when I'm creating.
So instead of architecting a piece, you sort of garden it.
Yes. I've been listening to your podcast, and I love that analogy because it was really helpful for me, because I find it hard to speak about my own work and my own practice and my process. But that's exactly, I was like, yes, I garden it. Wow, and I have an idea, and I plan
changed lives already. 5 episodes in, we changed lives.
No, but really, because it's because I feel like that analogy helped me kind of it's not that I'm just randomly looking at a garden. Like I'm planting a few seeds, and I have a slight vision, but I also work in the process and kind of like facilitate certain things. That was definitely very helpful for me. And I do have very like down periods, and then I'm super up.
Me too. Like
yeah.
So
like unproductive, productive, and whatever. Like I don't know why people keep going on about like the starving and the depressed artist. Personally, I can only create when I'm happy. Like for me, creating is a happy space. It's a happy energy. Excited. It can be even like whether or not it's about difficult things or like the subject matter, that's fine. But if I'm down or angry or upset, like I'm not going to create anything at all. I have to be in a good space. I have to be in a good mindset. It definitely comes from a happy energy and a good energy for me.
That's a very interesting question that I always generally ask. Like, you know, are you more productive under duress, or are you better when everything's serene? You know.
Oh, so I like the duress. So that I do like working hard, and like I do like pressure. And a bit of like
but positive pressure, like going from 2 to 3 rather than -2 to -1. If you know what I mean, like
no.
like making like hey, I've got some money and I'm making some more. Awesome, that's inspiring. Versus like I've got no money, I've got debt, and I have to pay it off.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
So that's how it works for me as well. Like it's a positive reinforcement loop.
Yeah.
You know?
So for me, it's a lot about mindset, like where I'm at mentally, and I love to work hard, and when I'm excited and when I'm keen, and then I don't mind it. But and then I like the bit of pressure. Like I do like a little bit of chaos. Like that's fine, but it just needs to come from a good energy. Like it needs to come from an exciting, like
excited.
If I'm excited, I can work all night kind of thing, you know. But if you're like, ugh, I'm not gonna sit in my studio because I'm so sad, then I'm gonna go watch movies and eat.
So do you think that it sort of evens out to be as if you just sat normally? So when you're super inspired, you do amazing work and you work really hard. You know, the quality of it and the time you spend on it, it goes in loops like a sine wave. Like, do you feel like it would even out over time if you had, you know, hypothetically, like if you work normally, like?
So I am saying all of this, I still have like quite a structured routine in terms of my process. I come to the studio every day. I usually come here in the morning and leave around 5.
Oh, by the way, just to set the scene, so we're sitting in sort of the back room inside a bank vault, or like a vault that this building used to It had money in it or something.
I think it's an old bank or something.
But there's a massive door that we locked the dog out on the other side of, like one of those thick doors. So so it's kind of and we're sitting sort of in between like canvases, you know, like on either side of a small table. So it's good sound dampening, you know.
Yeah, I'm glad this room came to some better use than what I've been using it as storage.
Yeah. Anyway, so do you feel it evens out over time?
Oh yeah, so that's what we were speaking about. Well, so what I was saying is I actually do come in pretty regularly. But then what I find is that on the days I'm less productive. So what I used to, I've got quite like a guilt-ridden personality. So I used to, when
like you feel sick. Well, you feel like
I should work more.
Yeah, like enjoying yourself is hollow. Like when you haven't worked. That's how I feel. Like
interesting.
It's sort of poison from the inside. Like if you spend half a day, like watching series.
Oh
like,
no, like not a chance.
But if you were to, like, it would feel terrible, you know.
But so this is definitely something that I'm trying to like get rid of because I think it's a really impractical approach. So I am an artist. I have a different type of work. So I think it's good to have structure in your life. But I also think that sometimes I can try and keep to it too structured. So what I was going to say is like, when I was just out of Michaela's, I used to come to my studio, but I was so unmotivated. I'd literally just check in like early, like 8, 9 or whatever. And then I'd go to sleep in my studio on the sofa. And then just so that I had spent like my 8 hours a day in the studio. So I was kind of like simultaneously a bad boss and a bad worker for myself for no reason at all. Yeah. So like... And I did this for maybe like a couple of months. Like I was just super unmotivated and uninspired. And then I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is ridiculous. If you're not, you know, you're not fooling anyone. There's nothing to be gained from this. And so I've really been trying to embrace more like kind of like valuing different types of work. So like I often feel like I have to produce actual work to feel like I was being productive. So I feel guilty when I research or when I, or even like taking times, like at Michaela's, I remember I never used to speak to the other people because I was like, this is work time. So I've always struggled a little bit to value like different, to see the picture as a whole. Like I felt like unless I was painting for 8 hours, I wasn't actually working. And as I've gotten older and working more in my process, I'm trying to learn to value different types of production. And like also it's not the amount of hours and like, trying to learn what it is that makes me a better artist and how I work the best. And so now I'm better at like, I will still keep to a routine because that's what I like routines, like it makes me feel good. But if I'm uninspired, I might go home earlier and go for like a really long run, or I might do research or do something else. And if I am inspired, I'll kind of ride that wave. But I don't go like entirely off the charts. Like I don't not work for a week because I'm uninspired. Like I'll just kind of slightly shift my working tasks to what fits better in different periods. So I find like, particularly in terms of production and absorption, being like two quite distinct things that I take time. So like for a while, I'm like really like researching and investing and kind of filling up my own, I don't know. And then other times I'm kind of giving and pouring out. I don't know if that made sense.
No, it makes total sense. Yeah. There's something to be said for, work really hard for, 5 hours and then go for a surf. But there's also something to be said for just pitching up, like at every hour, just pitching up. Something might happen and you might go on a tangent and then you might be super inspired, even though you thought that the day would be, like, but if you're surfing, then it's not going to happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you'll be surfing and then you'll be bloody tired afterwards. If you stay like working if you stay in the studio, like doing something, then it might happen, and then you might have a really productive afternoon. So there's something to be said for either one.
But then also if you go surfing, you might speak to someone who then prompts something that then pushes. Yeah. So I'm like, I often find that like I undervalue the water cooler effect of moving outside of my studio. So
this is very cool because like, what is the value of a like modern, like a postmodern, up to the minute artist right now? Like, do we want you to do, like, is it valuable for you to work on your technique and get your profiles and your faces like exactly right and your mix of colors and everything to work on your technique technique so that you can represent a like life as good as possible. Like always your value bringing what you've learned in your life to something which doesn't necessarily have to have technique. Like it can be just something really whack, as modern art. You know what I mean? Like, is your story more important, or is your technique more important, or is it a mix of both? You know what I mean? Like, I would say these days, like, everything's been done with regards to technique, whereas people's stories these days are important. So it's important to go out there and live life, to have something to say.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a big, I do love technique, and like I mentioned, I love painting.
Such a sucker.
Such a sucker for some good technique.
Such a sucker for I know this guy has done it got this perspective and got this stuff down without a photograph or whatever, like straight from his head, because maybe the scene isn't really realistic or whatever, but there's technique, and I'm just such a sucker for that.
Absolutely. But I also totally agree with you that the story and that's like a lot of weighs quite heavily, and I think for me that's really important, like what you bring into it, and
exactly,
that the experiences that you take.
Yeah.
So just like what is life about it at the end of the day?
And what do you have to say,
Yeah, jeez.
Yeah. Because both can be very banal. Like, you can do a painting with amazing technique, which can be kind of banal, and then someone can just splash some paint on a canvas, and then that can be banal as well. Like, just so what? In both cases, you can say so what.
Absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, so what? Like, that is, I think, so what is maybe more interesting than we often give it credit for.
What do you mean, so what?
So what? Like, life is a strange place. It's like, we credit all these different things and think of them, and at the end of the day, we are just here for a little bit and then passing through, and it is all quite banal at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like the experience of living.
If you zoom out,
you
zoom out, your life is so small.
And even as opposed to as a humanity, it's in the big, if you zoom far enough,
If you zoom out a little bit, your life is pretty meaningless. And then if you zoom out even more than that, it's like
Earth.
Yeah. And it's like, what are you doing to, further the, trajectory of humankind? Like, not really. I'm just, enjoying chocolate and watching series and,
Yeah.
Anyway.
So speaking to my dad about this, and he said something I really like, which is that all of what we're all doing as individuals is generally quite you could take it away from the bigger picture and it wouldn't make a difference really. You individually aren't necessarily, but if you took the whole field away, it would make a huge difference.
That's a very econometric way of thinking, but he's very right.
So you're part of a field and the field is important, and so in that way your contribution is important, and I like that. Totally, we it's not
in aggregate.
We are a very individualistic society, and often what do I do? But sometimes your contribution is being part of something bigger.
And in art, often if you look at art history, people that really made a difference, maybe they didn't set out to make a difference in the beginning. They were just doing their thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, when speaking of art history, it's really interesting to think about the people that we think of as having made a difference and having made a massive shift, or being at the forefront. We often think about this in retrospect, and I don't think we realize necessarily how they were perceived or how they were perceiving themselves in the moment. We are watching with retrospect, and did they make a difference when you zoom out and look at the 100 years plus minus them, or did they make a difference that year, or and I think that's really interesting.
Often, a really important piece is sort of hated in the beginning, and then people come around to it 50 years or 100 years or 5 years later, because then you always think I'm sure as an artist you think wow, imagine if I could be that artist that I'd love that to actually make an impact like they did. But then you'd also have to deal with 10 years of being ridiculed, to actually make that difference,
Yeah, I definitely feel art as a field, art's relationship as a field in terms of pushing boundaries is very interesting when you look at it historically and how it operates today. It's very much a catch-all phrase. If you're writing a proposal, you kind of have to say that your work is just pushing a little bit of boundaries somewhere, you know? Can't be like, oh, I'm replicating something else.
Yeah.
So it's like very much intrinsic in how we think about art, particularly in the Western sphere, which I think is really interesting. I wonder sometimes if we get too caught up in the idea of pushing boundaries today, as opposed to being, so it becomes more about pushing boundaries than maybe being following your own road, or like, so I think that pushing boundaries is very interesting, by the way, and I think that we have space to do a lot of different things. I'm not too phased about that. But maybe sometimes I think if you set out to push the boundary, you're kind of almost like operating within the system, within your own system, at least today. Whereas maybe if instead of setting out to push the boundaries, you set out to pursue something that's like true to yourself, then that will almost maybe inadvertently be a way to push the boundaries on its own. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
That in itself can be a form of pushing boundaries that is quite interesting to me. A lot of the artists historically who have pushed boundaries maybe just did what they were really interested in, truly. They didn't do it to like reject something. I mean, some of them obviously did. But I think there's something that really interesting that can come out of that. Whereas if we today we have the advantage and disadvantage of having so much information. Like at my age, you know, you're so conscious of like the importance of pushing boundaries and the importance of doing something new. And I think that is a product of, because we read a lot. Like, I'm obsessed with art history. I love reading about it, and we have a lot of knowledge. We know what everyone else did, but maybe we then become too focused on like doing the next move or whatever, as opposed to focusing it on our own and like picking our kind of corner and polishing it, and then allowing that to grow, whether or not it becomes then pushing a boundary or not. So I think if you're pushing a boundary, why are you doing it? And is it just to be a rock star, or is it actually, are you a person that pushes boundaries in general? Like, yeah, like, is it something you're wanting to push against? Either way, I mean, go for it. Like, be a rock star too. Why not? Well, people can be rock stars in different ways, like, you know. Absolutely, yeah. Anyway, there's an amazing quote that I want to read by Stephen Fry, who's a hero of mine. Oh, nice. So this is from one of his autobiographies. Novelty and originality come from the how and the who, not the what. No one will get anywhere unless they do what they do best, and everyone in their secret heart knows what they do best. Wow. Fry is giving us a lot of credit, like, that we all secretly do know in our hearts, and I'm like, yeah, how do you know? Yeah, do we know that? but also there's something to be said for like self-molding, you know, like you can mold yourself pretty well. Like, yeah, if you have a stutter, like you can kind of fix it through speech therapy, or if you are bad at your times tables, you could learn them. If you're, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to accept exactly how you are, you know. No, but I think then that comes back to maybe playing to your strengths, which is like, you have some kind of like innate predispositions, and then kind of working with them, which I suppose I do believe, like, you know, we all kind of continuously changing and growing and molding, but it's also like, instead of playing against, so for me, when I try to always produce in the work between like 7 and 9, that was like, between 9 and 5, that would be like me playing against my strengths, because sometimes instead of like riding with my own waves and kind of going with myself. But I mean, with creative stuff, and with art especially, because art is like a continuous versus discrete like endeavor. So a discrete endeavor, like discrete things are like one table, one chair, and a continuous thing would be like time is continuous. You can divide it up into many. You can divide it up into fractally smaller bits of time, whereas there's only 2 chairs here and 1 table. Like, that's a discrete number, you know. So, and so doing something like accounting is more discrete because there's rules and blah 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 blah. Mm-hmm. Whereas art is like, you've got this blank canvas and literally anything. Like, you could draw a line and the line could go at any point down the line. It could branch off. Like, it's completely the completely continuous scenario, you know. Absolutely. So with that kind of thing, you need inspiration, you know. You can't just slug it out doing the same thing, you know. So yeah, I would say, like,
lean in when you're feeling good, and then try and do something productive when you're not feeling good. Like,
exactly. And there's like always admin to do.
Like, or watching art documentaries, or discovering other artists, or
100%.
admin. Like what?
Like,
don't you have a gallery that does all the admin for you?
They do. Shout
Doesn't
out to 99. Georgia's amazing. No, but you still have to do your taxes and like, I don't know, emails, newsletters. Yeah, there's always admin to do, even though you have a gallery. At least I find there's always admin. But I still don't do it.
But life admin as well, like debit orders.
I think working as an artist, I tend to, like, I don't always distinguish between like my life admin and my art admin, and like like they all kind of feel quite intertwined because my work is my passion and it's what I love. So it's not like work.
Yeah,
it's not like the separate distinction between. Yeah. I mean, watching a documentary could either be research or just enjoying my Friday evening kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've always felt like that as well, like wanting to onboard whatever you do, like as a part of you, not I am as someone who does something and then on weekends I do that. It's like, no, I'm just me and I do this thing.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of difficult, yeah.
And I think it's obviously like, I suppose if I worked for someone else or it was a different form of work, it might not be as easy. But it's quite nice. I think if it's one of the privileges as being an artist, or getting to work with what you love. But it can also mean that it's hard to draw the boundary and kind of makes
exactly,
it's like when you spend too much time with your partner and you're like, actually you should go see someone else. And sometimes I used to spend all my time in the studio, and then when the weekend finally got there, I'd be like, sweet, I'm not gonna go to the studio. And it can be really good to do like different things to
but even with just friends, like not a boyfriend or girlfriend, like, or spouse, just if you spend loads of time with certain friends, then it also gets.
Do you have certain friends that you don't like spending lots of time with?
Not at the moment. I don't spend enough time with.
He doesn't have a lot of friends at the moment.
I haven't spent that much time with enough people with certain people to feel irritated by them. I need to spend way more time with people.
Yeah, I mean, Corona has really like helped in that regard.
Yeah, but I've always been like able to be extroverted when I need to, but I can spend a week alone without seeing anyone.
No.
Be perfectly fine.
Oh my word. I have the worst ants in my pants.
You're an extrovert, basically.
I'm sure everyone who knows me will be like, yes, but I honestly...
you don't have to be fatuous if you're an extrovert, you know what I mean?
No, I'm like an extrovert, but also an introvert. So like, I find it easier to spend time, or I find it less stressful to be in a massive group with no one I know than I do to spend one-on-one time with people.
So this is super stressful for you.
Well, can't you tell? I'm joking. Well, no, because I don't really honestly know you that well, so there isn't a lot of pressure.
Oh,
no,
okay,
I just mean like that's
what something an extrovert would say.
Do you feel flattered now?
No, it's just something an extrovert would say.
Okay, so I can find like, but I mean that said, as I've gotten older, I have a lot of really close friends that I love spending time with. But it was always something I found quite stressful and nerve-wracking when I was younger. Was like being at a party and being in a big setting with people I don't know. I find extremely low energy consuming.
Okay, so one last thing before we break out the G&Ts.
Ooh.
If no one were watching, and no one was going to see any of your pieces, like, how much of an effect would that have on you?
I think that would have a massive impact. I absolutely love the part when my work comes together and they engage with people. Like that for me is a huge, if I'm being honest, like that's a huge part of my work. I really am a people's person, so I spend a lot of time alone. I work alone most of the time. And I think if there was never any interaction and if my works never had an engagement outside of my... And
feedback, like what do you do it for? You're affecting people, like you're...
Absolutely. I think I would struggle to find that like excitement or... I'm definitely drawn by... Like, I love visualizing the works coming up together, or like the engagement aspects of the work as well.
And its reception, Yeah. Okay. Well, that was honest.
Well, it is what it is. Like, I feel like everyone knows me anyway. Anyone who knows me knows my true colors. They're pretty obvious. So.
Okay, so after a massive break and a G&T, we're back.
It's like 2 hours later.
So could you try and explain the discomfort a new artist feels when they initially start to put themselves out there? Like, just say, now I'm an artist, like, you know.
I think it's a lot about like, or for me, it's been a lot of like uncertainty, like, because art doesn't have like a concrete measure or metric with which to, like, if you're working in any other field, you can kind of look around and be like, oh yeah, this guy's charging this and this is what he's producing and whatever.
That's even more mushy. Like, an estate agent can say this house is valued at this and this and this, but if you're an accountant, you can say, there's the answer. You can say,
exactly, I charge this an hour, and you can Google like the average rate. As an artist, like, there is none of that, and I do find that to be, particularly in the beginning, like, you're like, am I really worth this? Am I not worth it? Is this crap? Is it not? Because there's also not like good art. Like, you don't tick the boxes of good art. To society, or like, I suppose there's a variety of people and institutions and whatever that determine what's considered good art, but there isn't like, it's not a math question, and I think that's super intimidating at first, and like trusting yourself. So that's pretty awkward.
So the next question like leads into that. Like, one of the major hurdles an artist has to face in the beginning is like building the confidence to trust their own process and intuition, and like, you know, what's to know when something's of worth and something isn't, you know, and when it isn't. Like, how long was that for you? Like, do you feel like you've got there, or you feel like you're still?
No, 100% definitely still working on this one. I feel like I often have friends come into my studio and they'll be like, oh, I really love this, and I was like about to paint over it.
Oh wow.
And then, you know what, when you're working, I feel like it's a little bit like cooking when you're working in your studio, because you're very much like involved in it and you're tasting a lot along the way, and it's hard to really like, is it really too salty? Is it like, often I feel like when you're cooking, you feel like it needs more flavor. You don't taste it as much, and then someone who has your dinner is like, oh, this is amazing, but you don't really feel it, you know, while you're making. Not to say that my works are amazing, but what I'm trying to say is like, it's hard to see them from the outside when you're in them. So a lot of the time what you're maybe liking and feeling like it needs more of, maybe it actually didn't, but you just kind of too consumed. So I mean, I think it's great if you have space, if you have time, like time off, to step back and take time outside of your studio. But I think quite often when you're in the process, it's hard to see them. Yeah. Anyway, so it's like for me at least, it's something I'm still trying to figure out, that like, how much time does each painting need, which also varies a lot, and trusting myself a bit.
You're stepping onto the toes of the next question. Again. Okay, well, let's do another one in between. What do you think about shared studio space? Like, does working in the energy of other artists like homogenize your work, or does it push you in your own direction, or like, do you feed off the energy, or do you?
So I currently have no, that's not true. I currently have my own studio space, which is private, and I don't share it. And I absolutely love it because it's like my little sacred tomb. And I really love that, like, my space is, I need a lot of space. Like, I need to not back into someone else's space. I need to feel like I can fling paint and not, like, I can't work in a contrived space, and I can't work in a space, I can. It just really impacts how I feel about working and how in the flow I feel. And so in a way, like, having my completely encapsulated space makes me feel it really facilitates me to be present in my process. That said, I do miss the interactions that working in a shared space during university provided. And so lately I've been really fortunate to have a lot of the water cooler. Exactly. But so, like, having a lot of like studio visits has been a great way to kind of like, what's it called? Juggle that one for me. We just took the heater off, if you can hear the difference. But yeah, I've definitely thought about it for the future, that I would like to also try work in more interactive spaces. But I do like the privacy. I always have, as much as I'm a quite extrovert, I quite enjoy my private space where I feel like safe.
Yeah. So, the question.
Woohoo!
When is a painting done?
Oh my word. Well, the painting is done when the show happens. So like,
That's what Swain said as well.
No, I'm joking. I spend anything from 1 day to like a year on a single painting. It really flippin' varies for me. There's no one time. I find it, when I work on murals, I work very differently, and I usually finish them within like a set period of days, which would be like 3 days or 4 days. It's a very different process. Same if I do like a commissioned portrait or something more practical. But if I work on my own paintings, it literally sometimes is like, yeah, that was it. That was 1 day. It'll just turn out to be exactly what I wanted. And sometimes it takes me forever. And figuring out when it's done is definitely, I think, some of the things I'm trying to like work on, you know. I often feel like I overwork my works as part of insecurity. And I think that there's a maturity and, what's it called? What's the opposite of insecurity? I'm having a brain.
Not contentment, but
confidence.
Yes, okay.
I think there's a level of confidence and maturity needed to know when to stop that I feel like I'm still trying to hone.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Do you find that all the artists are starting to answer the same answers to your questions, or do we respond very differently?
Well, most people have been sort of between 25 and 32 kind of thing. So it's kind of all in the same sort of age range, which
That's
I think...
a very valid point.
Yeah, so it's emerging artists. But Gabby Raff, the first...
I love her work, Gabby.
Yeah,
if you
she had more... she was more confident like about these sort of questions. So I think...
I definitely think it comes with time.
Yeah. But she did also say like she's not super sure about like it's always a question, you know. You're always questioning yourself.
But I think it's also part of the beauty. Oh, okay. I don't think that there's only one stage for a painting either. I think that a painting has infinite possibilities inherent in them. A little bit like I have infinite possibilities. I could be an artist, or I could be a therapist, or I could be something like. There are so many opportunities for me. What did you say?
A beat poet.
Ooh, no, I actually don't think I have that in me.
I just said the most random thing.
And I think a painting's a bit the same. You know, there are many different opportunities for each painting, like many ways it can be resolved, and I think that's part of what makes it so exciting to be a painter.
That continuous space, like it's not discreetly done or not, you know.
No, there's like the promise of infinite possibilities.
Okay, so let's get into the pieces.
Ooh.
So this is a segment during which the artist and I discussed 5 to 10 works of theirs, covering whichever aspect and whatever level of detail they're comfortable with. If you're listening to this as a podcast, i.e. not on YouTube, I strongly recommend you grab a G&T, get horizontal, and open up Instagram, where you can see our numbering of the pieces and the image descriptions, and you can follow along at your own pace. We'll say, okay, we're on image 1, image 2, image 3, or whatever. You can search for _art_investor, or you could click on the link in the description of this episode. Okay, so image number 1.
This painting is called Canada 1997, and it was part of my graduate exhibition at Michaela's School of Fine Art. The show is called Representing Self, so like a play on representing. If you didn't get it,
there's lots of that in
it's
art
very
shows.
much art school. No, I'm joking. So really, I was investigating my family photo albums and really trying to understand. You know, as I said, I'm from Norway and I grew up there. And coming to South Africa was, I became very conscious of all that I had taken for granted and all the kind of like paradigms and ways of thinking that I had inherited from childhood, and how they weren't necessarily like natural, universal. And it was really quite a time of like reflecting on my own, on where I was in my own upbringing and my own understanding of the world and my place within it. So all of this series of work took my childhood images, and this one is a painting of myself jumping on a trampoline, and it was paired with another painting of myself dressed in a ballerina outfit. And what I liked about these two works is, well, I've always been interested in figure painting for one, and I really am interested in the figure. I think I'm really interested in the experience of being alive and just what it means to be, and like how we understand and see ourselves, and how we understand our place in the world, and our and how what impacts it. And I think what I like about this painting is a lot of people read it as a boy, for obvious reasons, like it's,
Yeah.
But it speaks to, and in that very basic way, it speaks to ideas about gender, but also more just the jump. It's this like moment of suspension between two. It's floating, and I think it's something interesting about moments of suspension.
Yeah, maybe you're like jumping, but you've reached that exact point where you're not going up or you're coming down. You sort
Yes.
of reach that exact, you know what I mean? Like if you plot it on the graph, it goes like this.
Absolutely.
You're at that maximum.
It's like a weight. I think I've always been interested in how well, again, like for me, images of the body in a weightless or floating space is kind of speaks about being in your body. I'm interested in being in our body, and how and when we become aware of us being in our body, like most of the time we walk around, we're not really conscious of like the fact that we are watching, or that we see the world in color, or that we feel things. Only when we're discomfort or out of the norm do we really become conscious of this. Yeah,
exactly. Because when you're jumping on a trampoline, you feel gravity working on your body in a different way, and you feel like your shoulders go down, and you feel like the weight of your flesh, like as you hit the trampoline, it goes down.
Yeah.
So you can feel and what you ate. You can feel everything.
And what you ate. I think that's a very valid point. Yeah, it's like you become conscious of yourself in a different way, and I'm interested in that. Like when we're kind of like pushed out of our autopilot. Yeah.
Cool. Very nice background as well.
Thank you very much.
It almost looks like it looks like leaves, but it also looks almost like kids' hands.
So I really enjoy people's interpretation, and I was lucky enough that art critic Lloyd Pollock wrote a substantive review of my show.
Uh-huh.
And it's so interesting to read how other people interpret my works, and often I find like they read so much depth and interest into it that I'm like, I feel very grateful when people take the time to look at my works and give me feedbacks, and also like share their experience. And I think what you're saying is really interesting. Like I totally see what you're saying, like these like child, when you put your hands and stuff, and like Lloyd was speaking about this as the color of bruising and the skin being bruised. I thought that was so interesting.
But really, like art is to show us our own reaction to it. You know what
Completely.
I mean? Like teaches you about yourself. Like, oh, why did I feel weird about that, or why did I think that, or teaches you about your own subconscious. And
yeah, absolutely. I think so
too. That's the point, right?
Well, I think for me, it's like a really interesting part of it is like, what do I inadvertently reveal about myself?
Yeah, exactly. Cool. If we go to image number 2.
This painting is called The Bathers and was part of my first show after I studied at Michaelis at 99 Lab Gallery. Bathers are like figures that feature quite often in my works. I think that I'm interested in the water and people swimming for a lot of reasons. Like I mentioned, I'm really interested in the human form, but also I'm interested in water in the sense that, it has a lot of connotations like the subconsciousness. I also often think about water as being the connecting part between South Africa, where I live, and Norway, where I'm from. And just the way our bodies operate in water is so different from day-to-day life. But this entire show is based off images that were from my family photo album and reflecting on how they relate to art history. Sorry. So each painting has a title that's borrowed from art history. So The Bathers is one that's like, it's not even borrowed from one artist. There's been so many. And I repainted my own family photos, reflecting on when does something become universal? Like, when does it go from being my personal memory to being a universal image that depicts like a trope? So when we think of the art history and the paintings and whatever, like we forget that those were like individual moments, and once they were just that person's painting and just that moment, and then now they're like, they speak about a period, they speak about a time or whatever. And I was interested in that relationship between the personal and the universal in a time of the digital and of the saturation of images in general.
What sort of, I mean, this is very cool. At the top right corner, you know, it sort of goes off into infinity there. I don't know, that adds a different dimension to it for me.
Yes, I quite enjoyed warping the sense of space. And
yes, exactly, because that looks like the end of, I don't know, like the end of the pool, you know, or something. But this is the sea, obviously, right?
Yes.
Or,
well, the original image is the sea, yeah.
So it looks like this is like the end of the pool or the end of the lake or something like this, or the skyline there, and then this is like a hill, and the water's going up the hill, you know.
So that was, for me, like that was the freedom that painting allows to kind of like push the boundaries of the real space and the imagined space, and kind of shift the way we. I mean, I love that painting is basically such an illusion. It's just color on a flat surface, but I also think that it allows for subtle distortions that kind of create
you wouldn't think
a new
about
perspective.
You wouldn't think about it unless you looked like okay, this and that, you know. And the drips are intentional, hey, like obviously.
Yes. So I quite enjoy drips and intentional mark makings, because they reveal a little bit about how the painting was made and the painterliness of the painting.
Reminds you that it's a real painting. It's real, you know. It's like not like a.
Or rather, it almost reminds you that it's not real. That it's like that it's a created image. But yes.
But for me, like in this age of like, you can take a picture and then put it through some sort of algorithm that turns it into like a painting and stuff.
That is so true.
They could never do that with these. With these, you know what I mean? Like, this is
You're
clearly
such a tech person. I'm so impressed. Like, no, my mind would have never thought that. I would be like, what? Wait, what? You can just make a painting into. I hear you, though.
I'm glad you find it interesting and less dreary.
I found that very impressive. Yes, I do. And often you don't see it on these paintings, but a lot of the time I like to work with my edges of my canvases. Sorry, you don't see it on the crops. But I like to work with the edges of the canvases to reveal the layers. I'm really interested in layers of paint and like revealing the skinness of the text of the canvas surface. So often either my edges, sometimes I use different forms of mediums to block out parts of the paintings. I can tear it off later so that you can kind of feel the layers. The surface and the layering is really important to me. I think often for me the painting is like, oh no, this is super cliche, but it's a little bit like our skins, you know. We can peel off different layers and reveal different things, but I think there's something to it.
I love these background image background people. So mine is like the first 5 people, like the people that are smaller than the first 5. Like, I don't know, I just find them really engaging, like really accurate. Okay, so image number 3.
This painting is titled Liberty and the Little Leaders, and I borrowed the title, for those of you who didn't pick it up already, from Eugene Delacroix's Liberty Leading the People. And it also dwells in the same theme as the previous one, so really like exploring my own family photos through the album of art history and just repainting and reimagining different scenes.
Cool. Looks like in a cave kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's also like, I'm quite interested in notions of the cave and these visual metaphors that are part of our common our culture. I think it's interesting to incorporate them into my works. Like, we have ideas about the cave, like what the cave, you know, whether it's Plato's cave or coming into light and darkness. I think I often like to draw on that kind of folklore-ish tropes.
Cool. Looks like green paint looks like acid, you know.
Oh, this is also my neon period. I'd gotten out of Michaela's and I was...
Your what period?
My neon period.
Neon, okay.
So like I said, I get extremely like passionate about something. And at this point, I was passionate about neon.
That's interesting. That adds something. It adds points to your artistic journey, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, I was like working in my own studio and no one could restrict my use of colors. And I was just going wild.
Because there's no one looking over your shoulder saying...
No one to justify why I... But I've always been very interested in colors. And I think for me, I'm like intensely emotional. For me, my artworks are very much like a reflection of my own journey. And they're very tightly... they're very tightly connected to my own journey, and they're very much a personal space to reflect it. And I find that really hard. I think I've often tried to like make it about other things, but the truth is that at the moment that's where my paintings deal with the personal and often the emotional. And as a person, I'm really emotional. Like I get super, super happy, but I also get really sad. And so high-keyed colors feels very natural to me. It feels very like it expresses how I feel, you know?
And contrast. Yeah.
So there's like bright green and really like yucky, and then these other washes. I mean, that play with colors has been a way to kind of, to reflect my own experience.
Cool. Okay. On to image number 4.
So this is part of my paperwork. So a lot of my works are quite large. I really like to work, like on larger canvases. But then I also quite enjoy paperworks, and that's why I wanted to include this one, because the paperworks are much smaller. They allow for a totally different like painterly approach. And so often I find that my paperworks are more. Often I find that my paperworks are more looser. And in this one, I was working with like digging in, but they're also really, we spoke about it earlier, like if you travel as a computer programmer, you can, you have your laptop, and traveling as an artist is really amazing, and you can do different things, but it also puts certain restraints on the access to mediums or space or facilities. So
you can't carry around a massive canvas.
No, my 2x2 meter canvases are actually quite hard to travel with. So these paperworks are like, I did a lot of them during lockdown in the smaller space, but I also really enjoyed them because they were quick and they were like emotive. So these ones were part of a series of, I just titled them Day 1, Day 2, and it was just feeling of like just counting days, counting moments.
Being washed out.
Yeah.
What are these lines, sort of quarter in, halfway?
So those are marks that I've been making, but like scratches that I've been making into the actual surface of the paint, as well as the figures are also like scratched, or the figures are scrubbed out and those are scratched in. And that is, for me, it's like engaging with the different surfaces and almost like drawing in the paint. And I like that it reveals layers underneath, because underneath there was a more painted out image, and then these scratches are revealing parts of that painted image that was then layered.
Okay. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, that orange looks like she's a redhead, you know.
I never thought about it before now. A little bit of a halo.
I think the signature sort of messily half, down at the bottom there.
That's so neat. What do you mean messily?
There. It's
super neat.
Is it? Okay. But it's like sort of damaged here on the bottom right.
It's not okay, this is part of the work, guys. No, I'm joking. So when I work on paper, I do try to avoid too much tearing, but I also really enjoy a little bit of tearing, because I feel like it reveals the texturality of the paper and the...
Totally, yeah.
It's not about like the rough aesthetic as much as it is that it kind of like infringes on the edges. Like very often we think of the art as belonging to somewhere like outside of society or outside. And I like the fact that these are kind of revealing the materiality of the painting. The illusion doesn't hold.
Yeah. It's not a perfect window into something.
Yes.
Cool. Image number 5.
This painting is titled Sounds of the Night, and it was part of my second solo show at 99 called Mist Memories. And it was painted during lockdown. And I was really like enjoying working with these almost like, I imagine it like being pages out of a book. So I was really imagining it like storytelling and the layers that I could add to each page and feeling like it was just like a window into something else. In this case, I really wanted the feeling of a window, and working with kind of washes of paint on top, so that many different images were almost like blurring together a little bit. Again, having people as a central focus. I also really enjoyed working with these paintings in the sense of using like layering. Again, you can't really see the edges, but the edges were all painted yellow to kind of push against, so like there's a pull and push against the illusion versus like the layering of paint.
I love these at the top left and right corners, the darkness behind the leaves, you know. But yeah, for me, it sort of evokes like the sort of fantasy, playful, play nature of like when you're 6, you know, when you're a kid, because everything is sort of you know, tinted, and also the leaves are way too big. You know what I mean? The leaves are twice the size of someone's head. You know what I mean? So it brings up that like fantasy element. You know,
Absolutely.
like Lost Boys, or like Catcher in the Rye, or like Lord of the Flies. You know, like children being stuck in nature, and like you're seeing things through like a playful child's lens. You know.
Yeah. Which I think it was a very strange time. I mean, it was during lockdown, and it was really, I was actually on a farm in Plettenberg Bay in nature. So it's interesting. But yeah, just looking at stories as ways of understanding times.
You say some people find your art like quite not too happy. They find it sort of quite disturbing sometimes, some people.
Yes, so very oddly, a lot of people interpret our art as very hopeful and very like sometimes nostalgic and sentimental and childlike. And then some people see it as quite dark and a bit like twisted.
What are they seeing when it's dark and twisted? Because I'm in the first camp.
Well, I don't know if this one is necessarily the ones that are dark or twisted. I think they see something a little bit off. Like you said it, I mean, I don't know if this one would be one of my darker paintings, but I think that they see things being a little bit off, and like the happy, you know, very often childhood memories, childhood photos are masking like not such a great moment, and like what's like behind the allure, what is the perfect image trying to conceal. What is not being present, what is a little bit off. And I think that's interesting. Like I did, in many ways, I think I had an amazing childhood.
Yeah,
I feel very grateful. Yeah, we bonded on that.
That's probably why I'm not reading into it like other people who have had less than optimal childhoods might.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's always interesting what people read in. So personally, I had a great childhood, and at the same time, I've had my own struggles as I got older with mental health, particularly in my teens, my late teens. And I do think people pick up on that in my paintings sometimes, like subconsciously. The challenges I've had, whether it was with depression or different issues. But I also find it interesting that they can read it through, because it's not necessarily something I consciously try to show or not show. I'm not trying to make dark paintings or happy paintings on their own, if that makes sense.
Yeah. For me, like you saying that adds another layer to your work. You know what I mean? It is for me about not just the work; it's also about the artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's really cool, though.
So like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah. I think sometimes people like inadvertently the lens that I come from. Inadvertently, I think that my background sometimes infiltrates into my works, and that my own challenges to understand my place in the world and like who I am and my struggles with being and who I want to be filters through, and people can read that, which I think is really interesting when they do pick up on it. Like I mentioned, Lloyd Pollock was like shockingly on point with a lot of things. No, it was like super Because he doesn't know me from a bar of soap.
And you sort of felt under the needle kind of thing.
I felt unclothed. I mean, it was a beautiful review, and it was far too kind and generous with my works, absolutely. But it was also like really pointing to some things that really hit home in a weird way, and that I didn't even necessarily see myself.
But at least the dog stopped snoring now. No, I'm kidding. Cool. Okay, so image number 6.
These were part of a series of works that I called the Nightlights, and they were also painted during lockdown. And for the first time, I installed LED lights behind them. So they're basically like a canvas with painted that has a little light behind. So I took inspiration from nightlights like children have in their rooms, or a lighthouse at sea, kind of trying to guide seafarers. And they were really painting this hard, difficult time of Corona with like so much uncertainty and so much like up in the air. And I wanted something that was like emanating this sense of presence or being there. So yeah, this was, and I really also, I mean, I'm very passionate about color, and I really enjoy exploring colors, and having a colored light behind the paintings obviously affects the way the paintings read, and it emanates this like very pink light between the frame and the painting, which I really enjoyed. And it also means that they continuously change, which is something I enjoyed. So at night they would read very differently. During day and night, different colors would come out. I just liked this idea of them being something to hold on to, little beacons of light.
The one on the right particularly, when you turn the light off, that blue is probably very, very dark, eh?
Yes, exactly. And it also meant that then working with not just the paint and the color of the paint, but whether the paint was opaque, and the how many layers of paint I used. And yeah, like some colors are very translucent, some are more opaque. Obviously, if you layer it too much, it's going to get like the one on the right and the left. Actually, the blue colors would become super dark without the light. So it's just engaging that. And also the painting as a whole, like painting is not just being an image on a surface, but as an object, as something in space.
Awesome. Okay. Image number 7.
This one is titled Whitewashed, and it's one of my more recent works that I just finished. And when you asked me about how long a work takes, this is one of the ones that was like 99% finished in a day. And then,
in a day, wow.
And then I left the last 1% for like 3 or 4 months. I just left it totally. What I really enjoy about this work is, and it also ties back to what we were speaking about confidence earlier, is often I have in the past enjoyed my works at preliminary stages. Like I like the sketch and I like works that can still read the painterly or the sketched line, but then as you work them, that kind of dissolves a little bit. And in this one, it really has remained because it's very thinly painted, so you can see the underpainting coming through. You can really see the different stages of painting. And at the same time, it does feel like it has a little bit of a depth to it, which is something I really enjoyed, but also something that feels quite intimidating for me to leave a painting at this stage. And obviously, it's a mountain, which, a little bit of nostalgia in these Corona times.
Yeah, but I really like the perspective,
Thanks.
And I really like the fact that you can sort of. It's quite clear that if you were walking, you would go over there, want to see what is in that valley, top right kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it like draws you in, you want to walk there,
Yeah.
Very cool. So you're saying like you can kind of see through it, like these like big brush strokes, almost as if you took a massive brush and went up and down. Like, is that from before? Or?
Yes. Yeah, that's precisely. So you can literally see the underpainting shining through, which I enjoy.
Yeah.
I like it when the painting is. I think it's also where I'm at right now. I quite enjoy painting to have this like ephemeral feeling.
Yeah. Like a veil. You're looking through a veil of a cloth of gold. Exactly.
And that's also like our memories and our like, know.
Yeah, it's tainted just by your emotions and,
Exactly.
Cool. Image number 8.
So this is part of my newest work for my new series that I'm going to show very soon at 99 Loop, which is the working title for the show is Feeling Blue. And I mentioned earlier that I very often go through stages where I'm like super passionate about a work, about a subject matter or something, and then it dissolves. And for a long time I was really like interested in interrogating my family album, and I just honestly felt like that was the most interesting thing in the world. And then at that, like, I did it, and it was done, you know, and I was finished, and I went through a long stage of just kind of not having a new thing, and then eventually I found a new interest in color, and like how we experience color and how we engage with it, and particularly the idea of feeling blue, which I think is such an interesting thing to say. You know, we feeling blue as describing a certain mood or depression, of being down, but also sometimes being associated with being calm and serene. And I really felt like that spoke to where we're at the moment. And then the other thing with this series of painting was that I very often paint on canvas, and stretched canvas or paper, but I just felt like everything was so up in the air, and that stretched canvas just felt too rigid and too certain. So for this work, I've been working on fabric, so not canvas and not stretched, and I really have been dipping it in colors and really playing with it in an entirely different way. And so it's been really fun to like engage paint in a different way, and in a lot more relation to chance and to a lot more uncertainty in how it resolves, and different kind of ways of impacting. So this, and obviously the reason I chose this one is also because it's a very simple painting. It's just a person kind of bending over, washing their face. And I spoke earlier about finding it like the preliminary sketches or the basic outlines. And there's something about it that I really enjoy, but it's also one work that really challenges me in that I find it quite intimidating to leave a work at this stage, and yet it feels right.
So for me, like the blue, like is quite oppressive. Like it's quite like, you know, you can't do anything about this mood that you're in. You know what I mean? Because for me, it's like, but actually, I don't know how it is for you, but for me, it's like it's easier for me to break out of a bad mood than for me to get myself into a bad mood.
That's interesting.
Something external has to make me has to get me into a bad mood. But I can do something. Like order a pizza and listen to Game of Thrones Abridged, which is a very funny podcast about Game of Thrones. That will put me in a better mood, or I could do some really good work and that'll put me in a better mood.
Yeah.
You can force yourself to do that good work or something. But you can't really, you know, force yourself to feel bad if nothing's gone wrong, right?
No, I don't think. I also don't think we often try to force ourselves to feel bad, so no.
But yeah, the like the blue for me is very oppressive. Like, you know,
that is super interesting.
A blue room, like you can't do anything about it. You know.
I know. So I really like the idea of being
drowning.
like,
you can't breathe. You know.
Yes, and I like the idea of being in a room that's like, you know, the song Blue Dabba-dee Dabba-doo.
Yeah.
I like it. But I don't necessarily see it as oppressive in a bad way. I see it as consuming, and I see it as infiltrating. But again, for me, those are sometimes like becoming acutely aware of your presence in this moment. So for me, when I say feeling blue, I'm not just wanting to allude to the negative feeling blue, or the connotations of depression and down. I think those have been like the down feeling of 2020 has been probably persuasive for a lot of people. Yeah. But I also think of just colors in general, and that is a starting point into a conversation of colors and how we engage with them and feel.
Cool. Okay, image number 9.
And so neither one of these paintings have been titled yet because they are literally drying on the rack as we speak, but this is basically a massive painting, also in fabric, so also unstretched, of a man kind of looking down at his own reflection. And I really enjoy these works because they quite divert from my previous painting style. I mean, there's definitely like a relationship to it, but there's a lot of play in them, and a lot of chance, and a lot of working with the paint in a very different way, which has been really freeing. So I imagine these ones to be hanging in a room, and I really just want you to be able to walk up to them, and I want them to come off the walls, you know, so that you're almost like surrounded by these paintings.
This one's big.
This one's like 2 meters and something. Yeah, no, it's like much bigger than you.
How did you get the green? Is that like, you put it in there? Huh? Like it almost looks like it's rusted, you know?
Oh wow,
the green,
I love that.
Like a patina.
I wish it was. So with these paintings, I mean, I've been painting in a very different way, and I didn't even realize that I was doing it at first. But basically, like, it's been almost like washing my paintings in colors and dipping them and hanging them up in different ways, and then painting them and wetting them. It's been a really like practical engagement with my artworks, with my whole body, because they're so big, and I've been lying them down on the floors and cleaning the floors after them. So it's almost been like gardening these works. And so the green is the green color that I've seeped through and then kind of washed out the figure. The figure is non-color, so that's the color of the fabric. So, but the fabric got color during the process. I've also like had to literally like wash out my figure. It's the process of it's quite labor intensive, like sitting there with the with the swamp and a brush. But I really enjoyed it, and I don't know, there's something domestic and something lovely about it, like being able to fold them up. And
oh yeah,
I don't know, I've really enjoyed it. And as I was working on these, I was also doing research, and I realized that a lot of abstract expressionist artists were doing, I started resonating to them, which is a period of art that I've never really necessarily connected to before. Particularly like the artist Helen Frankenthaler, who became famous. She's a woman abstract expressionist who became famous for the soak stain technique, in which she like diluted oil paint to the point where she could like pour it onto the painting. So I haven't poured as much as dipped and brushed on, but still I really, it's been very interesting to channel in these different ways of actually working with the paint and really going inwards. Like, all of these works are not really about the image. The person is situating it as about being about human and our experience, but they're very much inward looking for me.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, so let's go on to the medium fire round of questions.
Go
so
first.
These are ones you can answer in a sentence, or we can go on a little tangent or so. And then after that, we've got the rapid fire no, think, yes or no questions, where you just have to say yes or no.
Boot camp.
Okay, so is there something you would advise young artists to cultivate early?
After listening to your podcast, I feel like I should have taken notes and write down something. But I didn't.
I think people are going to do that, so I better change these questions up.
You better change these questions. I think that having good artist friends and good people to like turn to is a really important step of cultivating.
To pollinate you, like
yes,
like all those serendipitous things, like, oh, have you checked out this documentary?
Yes.
Oh, have you heard this? Yeah.
I think that's really important. That's definitely something. I do think Instagram has amazing potential in a purely like commercial and like networking event. And I think it's important to like create ways that you're accessible and you can reach, if that's what you want to do. So maybe those two.
Cool. Who's your favorite artist and why?
I have so many.
Yeah,
this is like the worst question. You should really honestly not be asked. You should be ashamed of yourself.
No, man, but how
can you even ask this?
It is. It's like one of the things. It's one of the major things. It's like, how could you not ask that? How could you interview an artist and not ask that, right?
I don't know. I'm
not asking what your favorite color is.
Have you ever had? Well, look around. Have you ever had an artist answer that with one name?
No.
Yeah, there you go. I love a lot of different artists, and I really go through periods where I get obsessed. Like at some point, I got so obsessed with Njeka Akunyili-Crosby, who's a Nigerian American artist, that I literally couldn't paint for like 3 months. I was so.
Wow.
And my Michaelis lecturer were like, "You need to let it go. Like, you just need to let it go." I was so amazed. I love artistry. I'm super like nerdy when it comes to it, and I can just. So as we're sitting here and speaking, some of my favorites. Maya Resnick, Frank Bowling, Helen Frankenthaler, Peter Doy, Olafur Eliasson, Apichaya Wantang.
Cool.
That's just a few of like my top.
Awesome. Okay. Natural creativity or determination?
So I think we're back to the same, but I really think both are super important. I think that if you want to succeed, I mean, I'm thinking this from a non-successful point and like, trying to figure it out, but I do think that it's really important to have both. I think that like you obviously have to have some kind of like inherent inclination towards it, and more than anything, like I think the most valuable advice I got at Michaela's was to stay excited and keep working with things that excite you. If you're not excited about it, you're just not going to be able to put in the effort and the time.
Yeah. And
you're not going to have something. So I do think that the natural talent is like a given, but then I think a lot of people have talent, unfortunately. Or fortunately. And so I do think that you need to cultivate like determination on top of that. And I think grit is so important, and perseverance. Like, you have no idea how many no's you can get on applications, and you're still going to get yes eventually, but like
applications for
whatever you apply for as an artist, like you're going to have to learn to take no's. You're not going to get yes. You're going to get a lot of no's on your road. And I think it's super important to just like, again, get that group of people who like keep you motivated and keep you excited together so that you can persevere. Yeah.
If you weren't involved in art, what would you be doing?
I sometimes feel like I could do so many things and be happy. Like I could be a tour guide. I think I would love that. Yeah. Hiking in the mountains. Also, I really think I would love being a therapist. Yeah, like I think there's probably even, my dad's an economist. That sounds interesting. Like behavioral economy, not normal, but So I do feel like there's a lot of things. But that said, the older I get, the more I'm like, yo, this is where my heart is. And it's become very much part of who I am in my life, so it's hard to imagine something else.
What do you think the most telling signs are for the future success of an emerging artist? I'm thinking like maybe you've seen like people take off, like your classmates, or like, what's in your experience like?
Wow, these are really good questions.
So this ties in with art investing,
Oh yes. I think when you know the person, it becomes not quite obvious, but like it's quite easy to engage. Like I think not everyone's going to be in it for the long run, and for absolutely obvious reasons. Like I don't think you should be an artist if you're not super, super, super passionate, and this really isn't what you want to do, because it's hard, and there's a lot of things you can do, and if it's not really important to you, I think do something else that makes you money and more stable. So I think when you know someone, it's quite easy to tell who's really kind of just young, and maybe the mistake is going too young. Maybe see who's been in it for a little bit.
That's very interesting, yeah, because often like it's the contemporaries of the great artists who saw them in the very beginning, and they were like, yeah, for sure, this guy's going to be famous, but they couldn't like afford to buy up as much art of that person as they could,
Yeah.
So I find like, if you could tap the minds of emerging artists, they would have friends who they can say, for sure, this
So you're asking me who you should invest in? Guys, slide into my DMs, I'll tell you. No, but I honestly mean it. I think if you are wanting to invest in an artist, I do think check how long they've been on there. Like, you don't have to be 1 year out to be emerging, or 2 years. Like, check if they're still hanging around after 3 or 4.
And because even if they're really good and showing promise, if they stop,
that's the thing. Then they're not going to be. And after 3 or 4, they're doubtfully going to be that expensive, unless you want to go to a grad show and buy up. But that's very much like first tier. Yeah. I think if you have the opportunity, follow them for. I mean, obviously invest early if you can, but also, as you see someone staying in the game, I think that's a really good sign.
Definitely, and progressing and morphing and.
Yeah.
If you could have any 3 artists dead or alive over for dinner, who would they be?
Oh, again, I wish I could have more.
No, you have to choose 3 for this one.
Okay, I really have to pick 3, hey?
No. But I mean, would you want someone who's totally sort of, a bit of a dickhead, like over for dinner? No, you wouldn't.
No, I don't know. I can entertain a decade for a night.
Would you have
And Gustav Klimt.
I was just about to say.
I know. I could see your mouth was about to form it. No, apparently Helen Frankenthaler was quite the sport, so I would like to have her.
Yeah.
The abstract American artist. I just really want to meet Olafur Eliasson, and it's within reach because he's contemporary, and I think he does such amazing things. Like, he's not a painter, but I love his work with color and our sensory experience. So I would really love to do that. And then, who's my last artist? Oh, this feels like do I pick a contemporary who maybe I can meet, or do I go back in time?
You know, you could say anyone.
Well, then I want to meet Gustav Klimt and know whether or not he's a douche. You know what? I love my Gustav Klimt. Let me meet him.
He'd be the guy you have to block on Instagram.
You think so?
Yeah.
I think so too. But how amazing if Gustav Klimt's like DMing me.
Cool. Okay, so now let's do the rapid fire no think yes or no questions. So you can't say
the sweat.
You can't think. You just have to say yes or no. You can't look either.
Did I listen to your podcast though?
Yeah, but you can't remember, can you?
I know there's one that I want to be like, yeah. But anyway, go.
There'll be 1 million people on Mars before we die.
No.
Work-life balance.
Yes.
One day people won't age past their prime.
Yes, but only depends on how you define prime. What is prime?
Classical, like Greek people, classically.
Okay, if you want to say that we don't age past, then no.
No. Classically, like classical society thought that 28 was the peak.
Oh my god, I did not know I was peaking. Thanks for telling me.
I thought peak was like 24 or 25. So
dude, I hoped peak was like 38.
We're both 28, by the way.
Yeah.
So
not
apparently,
feeling like peaking yet.
In the ancient world, apparently, 28 was, for men and women, was apparently the peak.
I mean,
I've peaked way earlier. I can show you a picture of me with hair when I was 21.
Woohoo!
That was
getting very excited.
I peaked way early.
I'm still counting on peaking. No.
Okay. People should give up shaking hands forever.
No.
You know, COVID, like people shouldn't shake hands.
No, I know, but that's just like we should go back to hugging, guys.
Art critics are a valuable and crucial net benefit to society.
No, I'm joking. Yes, we're all beneficial to human. All humans have value, okay? Even the art critics.
Okay, that's good enough. I wasn't gonna let you scream out of it, you know. But that was good enough. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.